Guys, today is the day. We're here with the experts in the mold, air quality control, and radon. Brandon Gitzinger, we're getting ready to start the podcast. Not the podcast, but the, what do you call it? Continual education class. Say a few words for us, Brandon.
Well, thanks for having us, Arthur. We appreciate it very much, and we hope to educate some people, help some people with their questions about radon and mold and moisture and water intrusion into buildings and homes. So this is an important subject that affects a lot of people's health, and so hopefully whoever attends will get something out of this today.
Beautiful. So you guys stay on. We'll get started, and we're a little bit of a crowd, but you guys can join us online on Teams. There's a link below as well. Let's go. I just got it. You guys could share this video. Let your friends know about all the important things about mold.
Everybody, if you want the notes, this will be the slides if you want to take the notes. I've got a fact sheet here on radon, which came from the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio Association of Radon Professionals, where I serve as the Vice President of the Board.
Okay.
2015. Yes, sir. This is something that was independently published. The latest data, and then just some stuff on our business. We can jump right in.
If you guys experience any difficulties hearing, or if there's any questions, make sure to drop them below. We're live on the Solomon Group page. You know if it's working? Have you guys checked it out? Sound's working good? It doesn't matter. Maybe if you guys can help monitor the questions, or if you share the stream and people are asking you questions on yours. Well, this is on the business page. Can you hear him?
All right, quick introduction to myself and to us. Environmental doctor. We're a business that serves the Ohio Valley region primarily, but also surrounding states commercially. We're licensed in Ohio and Indiana, not required in Kentucky and Michigan, where we also work occasionally. But we are nationally certified to work in any area of the country when it comes to radon and related issues.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
So we're also a contractor, which means we are licensed and certified to both measure, test, and design systems and install systems. So the systems are mostly what we would call a mechanical system, and it's permanently installed in the buildings, whether they be multifamily buildings, school buildings, other types of office or industrial buildings, and then of course single-family homes, where we install about 1,000 of them a year right now in this region. Again, this regional multi-state area, but residentially, the Ohio Valley is our primary market. Southwest Ohio. So, toward Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati regions. The National Radon Proficiency Program is a national certification program that will certify individuals, but you have to maintain that separately. In the state of Ohio, you have to be licensed by the Ohio Department of Health to practice this work, but you do not have to be nationally certified beyond the initial training process that you go through to get licensed by ODH. You can just renew that license with continuing ed. So we carry some extra certifications that enable us to practice commercial work, multifamily work, and then we use that experience, if you will, to provide service on the residential side, which is kind of a all more highly engineered, I will say a higher quality result or product, and more technical than what's required for single family typically, but it lends itself to gaining levels that are as low as reasonably achievable, and then keeping them that way for the long term in people's homes, which protects the family's health. We carry a contractor's license in the HVAC, which is part of the radon trade. Is basically a ventilation product. It's a ventilation system, and so that contractor's license for HVAC, which we're the only one in the region to carry and still have the radon license as well, it enables us to install non-traditional systems where we have multiple foundations, old farmhouses where they built onto it 5 times, that kind of a situation where the traditional radon system that you'll see, the piping and the little fan, those don't always work for some of the non-traditional or unusual home types, which you actually see out in Urbana, Springfield region. It's interesting because a lot of our business, when we analyze it, our heat map is kind of all over the place, but we service a lot, we do a lot of this work in the rural areas of the region. And it's interesting in those homes where the people have, it was an old farmhouse from the 1850s, and that's the small center structure, but then they put a family room over here, and they added this garage with some other little office or something, and then on the back they made a laundry room, and those all have to be addressed to effectively mitigate radon. So in those cases, we can do air exchange systems, fresh air ventilation, so we exchange fresh air with the air inside the house that has a higher concentration, and it'll effectively lower the concentration to a safe level indoors. The other thing that license enables us to do is we have an electrical license, because virtually all these systems require a power source, which is typically hardwired, and so we're properly licensed to extend circuits and tap into the existing power systems in a structure. And to my knowledge, nobody else in the area actually has that license. So it's one of those things that if you're required to pull a permit, we can pull it, and that type of thing, where other people just kind of skirt over that issue.
Just see if this thing's on. The sound is kind of
Should be a 3900.
check. Maybe bring it up a little bit higher.
Yeah.
The sound is just.
Pause for a moment, everybody.
You might just need to talk a little bit louder.
That's the source, right? You don't have to put in the source.
Yeah. It's the pain bottle.
Okay. All right, well, let's jump into the facts about radon. Not sure how much you guys know. Is it helpful if I stand?
You could try. I'm checking it on here to see how the sound is. If you could just maybe speak a little louder.
Let me just stand over and I'll just kind of talk to you from this. Radon is a radioactive soil
You can
gas.
try. I'm
It's
checking
naturally
it on here
occurring,
to see how the sound is.
and
It's not working.
it basically causes, it's the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers in the United States. So it's estimated to cause over 20,000 deaths a year, which makes it one of the top 10 causes of cancer mortality in the country when you look at all the cancer types. So if you look at pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, all the different types of cancer, radon-induced lung cancer is considered the number 9 cause of cancer deaths in the United States by itself, which is crazy. Smoking is number 1, and that's lung cancer is the top type of cancer in the United States to kill people. Smoking-induced lung cancer is number 1. Radon is number 9, and you have pancreatic and all these other different types of cancer in those. So it comes from it being naturally occurring. It comes from uranium in the soil. If you're familiar with uranium, that's what's used to create nuclear power. As most people know, it's radioactive. And so uranium is a solid. It's on the periodic table of the elements as a solid, and radon is on the same does, it breaks down, this uranium breaks down over 1,000 years, and it turns into radium, which is also on the table, and then ultimately, at the end of its life, it changes to a gas. It changes physical state to a gas, and that's when it becomes radon, is when it becomes dangerous to people, because when it gets indoors in high concentrations, you're just breathing normally, it's in your lungs, and then it damages the lung tissue is what it does, being a radioactive element. So, over time, if people are exposed to high levels for years, typically, it's not a 1 to 3, it's a, lifetime risk. Generally speaking, it can cause lung cancer in certain individuals, just like any other cancer. One person will get it, a bunch of other people won't, but it's the risk that we're dealing with, and we're trying to just reduce for people so that they don't have that as a source of risk in the home or in the building. And it cannot be detected by the senses, so it's kind of like a carbon monoxide or one of these other things that you can't see. I mean, even mold, even though you'll see it, if you see mold, we talk about that in the second hour, you see it, that's millions of spores. You can't see the individual spores floating around in this room or outside when you walk out. I mean, people have sensitivities to it from breathing it in. It causes symptoms, but you can't see it. So it's similar to some of the other environmental threats that we have, and allergies and allergens and so forth. So some of this I already kind of touched on. This is let me see here. Excuse me. This next one. Let's go to the next one here. This is just a color chart of the uranium decay cycle. And then once it turns to a gas, that's when it comes through the gaps, cracks, and holes in the homes, which are not really sealable because they're typically covered up by finishing materials, even framing materials. Builders don't seal all that stuff before they start framing your rooms and your perimeters of your homes and stuff like that. So you can't seal it out. And we've got a slide later that'll talk more about that. The history of the data is, so how we realized this was a threat, it goes all the way back to the coal miners in West Virginia in the 60s, coming in and out of the mines and coming down with all kinds of, lung problems, breathing problems, stuff like COPD now that we know, or, hardening of the lungs, asbestosis, and you guys probably heard of mesothelioma, and then in that, so studying, researching, and studying those patients when they would present with these problems, they discovered that, radon is an issue too, and that's kind of what it goes back. So the EPA got involved, they linked it to lung cancer, and then, once the EPA got involved, they started to record the data. They started to track the results of testing. They figured out how to test for it effectively, develop procedures, and then they started to log all the data. And so the EPA now has a zone map of all the areas in the country which is basically everywhere that it's been found in high concentrations. But in the upper Great Lakes to New England, through the Midwest to New England, that's where the highest occurrence and the highest levels and concentrations indoors are found. And so we're right smack dab in the middle of the highest region in the country for radon. So that's why here, especially during real estate transactions, it's recommended, I mean, really for everybody, but during real estate transactions, it's in the disclosures, it's recommended that people test if the home hasn't been tested professionally within the last 2 years. So if you have a test that's more recent, you can provide that to the other side of the transaction, and that is an official test. If it's within 2 years, considered an official test. Otherwise, it's recommended that people test during the transaction and know where that structure, that home or building stands as it relates to indoor radon concentrations. One other thing on this slide, University of Toledo, we do about 50,000 radon tests a year in the state of Ohio today, so every single year. Somewhere between 10 and 12, 13,000 mitigation systems are installed per year in Ohio. And so we do about 1,000 of those, which gives you a feel. I mean, we're, as far as I know, the largest contractor in the state of Ohio who's dealing with this stuff. And ironically, we're here in Dayton, which is it's been good because I think getting out, doing these types of things with people, talking to people, educating, you know, the agents have really taken that to heart, I think, and helped. The home inspectors have helped. The industry is strong in this area. So we all submit the data quarterly, and then the University of Toledo logs it by zip. So you can take whatever zip code you want, even within a city or a region like Springfield. You know, you may have 4 or 5 zip codes. In Dayton, you have 20 zip codes or something. So you can go in there by zip. It'll give you what the average concentration is in that zip code. It'll give you the highest result ever found in the history of the data, which goes back years and years now. Probably, I don't know about University of Toledo, but the data that we use with EPA goes back to the early 90s. So it's, let's say it's about 30 years worth of data. Don't quote me on University of Toledo's data. That comes through Ohio Department of Health and has to do with people who are licensed in Ohio. We are required to report every test that we do. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, it's a regulated industry. So it's like asbestos or even HVACs, anything you need to do, you have to have a license to practice for money. It's like that. So since they've been requiring the licensing, they've been tracking the data, and again, so you can get average, you can get the highest result found in that area. And as I recall, in Ohio, the highest result was in Licking County, and it was over 1,500 picocuries. So we use that 4.0. A lot of people know the 4.0 action level. They want it to be below that indoors. The highest result that we've seen in Ohio was in that 1,500 range, which is highly elevated. And so you can refer to the little handout there, that know your number. It gives you an idea of how high 1,500 would be. You know, I don't have that in front of me, but the 4.0 is, I think 4.0 is like smoking, what, 8 cigarettes a day. So obviously the concern would be extreme at 1,500 indoors. It would, over 100, if you get a result of 100, they recommend immediate action. 1,500 would be, don't go back in there until this is fixed.
Looks like Huber Heights is over 10 on average.
Yeah. In this area, I would say the average that we see when it is elevated is probably in the 8 to 10 range. It does vary a little bit by locale. It is a little bit lower as you get toward the river in Cincinnati, where you have more sandy soil. It gets higher as you come through Butler and Warren County into Montgomery County, and then it gets higher as you go through Greene County, through Springfield for that matter, and go toward Columbus. So Columbus is about 90% above the action level, in my experience. But here, I would say 50 to 60% of the tests are elevated in this area, and that's just of what's tested. Please go ahead.
So is the difference between like a 10 PCI and 200, is it just less fluid running modes in the soil, or is there anything else that can make that?
It's typically going to be the decay cycle of uranium, which is 1,000 years. So it could be 2, and then a year later it could be 10. But it's definitely the location of the uranium content in the soil. It's where it is in the decay cycle, and it's generally right under the footprint of the building. So it's going to be directly below the floor.
Right.
or,
Test it in like a crawl space.
yeah, well, we don't test in them, but we'll test above them. And about 50% of your home's indoor air is coming from that crawl space, or they say from underneath any foundation. Depends on the vapor barrier and how it was built, the integrity of the construction, because as they get older, that integrity, you know, it lowers itself, and things fail, the vapor barriers wear out. You've seen the builder grade vapor barriers, 30 years is probably about their limit. I don't even know that they last that long, but you know, after that, they get brittle, and you see a lot of them that are just kind of falling apart in a crawl space. Well, under the slab, it's really no different. It's basically outdoors. It's subjected to the elements, freeze-thaw cycles, moisture, things that just make materials fail. And so it is mostly, but it's also construction technique, age of construction, weather patterns, mechanical systems in the home. So things like a dryer, a clothes dryer is the worst, because it has to make up all the air that's shooting through the outside wall, but it doesn't have a makeup air duct from outside. So it's having to make up all the air that's shooting out the dryer vent to outdoors, has to make that up from inside the house. And what it does is it depressurizes it, robs air from the house, but the house will make that up from underneath through gaps, cracks, and holes. It's very interesting. So these are the things that when we get into these conversations, that's why I like to do this, because you know, it helps people understand, and don't hesitate to ask the question if great, because the last thing I like to do is stand up here the whole time and just try to talk. Anything that comes to mind, it's you know, perfectly fine. Please just let me know. Let's just make sure we're good here. Okay. So we'll get into some of the more detail on that question too later in the presentation. So maybe that'll give you a little bit more information. Supporters of the radon measurement and mitigation industry, and you know, the importance of doing this work and doing the testing and so forth, especially during real estate transactions, but in general as a homeowner or an occupant. Surgeon General's issued warnings. World Health Organization, which has set the action level at 2.7, it's significantly lower than the 4.0, and the reason is that that's where the latest research is showing that the lung damage is occurring beginning around 2.7 as an average concentration indoors. So what the EPA has said on this subject is, if your level's between 2 and 4 picocuries, we still recommend that you consider taking steps to lower your concentration. In the U.S., we use 4.0 as the action level, so for real estate, that is the line in the sand, if you will, that's typically the focus of negotiations around these transactions. Who's gonna pay? You know, they consider it a defect. If it's 4.0 or above, considered a defect during the home inspection. Be like anything else they ask you to fix. They say, oh, we found this outlet doesn't work, we want you to replace the outlet. It's just considered a defect, but then the sellers and the buyers have to negotiate, and there's no requirement that anybody, the seller doesn't have to pay for it. It's just, it goes on that post-inspection report, you know, because they consider it a defect, and then the sellers kind of feel like they have to at least respond to that in some way if they want the deal. So, you know, to be clear, it's not required that homes be mitigated, but it is a known health risk. So it's recommended. The American Lung Association, obviously, because it causes lung cancer. You know, the governor's issued proclamations. We have January is designated Radon Action Month. The National Safety Council, the National Academy of Sciences, NAR, has issued some remarks and positions on this subject, and encourage testing and so forth, and addressing the issue during the transactions rather than trying to avoid the issue. And then CANSAR, being the Cancer Survivors Against Radon, which is a nonprofit industry group that's formed, generally consisting of cancer patients who are considered to have radon-induced lung cancer. Which, you know, again, they kind of trace, that's how cancer is done. They try to trace in the patient the source. It's not 100%, you know, identifiable. I mean, if people get cancer, could be environmental causes, could be the food you eat, the pesticides that, you know, that are used to grow the food. It could be anything. So, anyway, this is an interesting list of authoritative bodies who support the industry and the work. Here's one from the general counsel, the lead attorney at NAR, a little ways back here, but he said handling radon properly may enhance the real estate sale rather than being a deal killer. So, you know, again, position being you're better off dealing with it than trying to kind of avoid dealing with it, because what happens is you kind of avoid it, or you recommend against testing or dealing with it, if you will. What happens is later the buyer tests, and then they're mad at you because, you know, you said, it's not an issue, it's a slab, and whatever you said. It's just not a good, it doesn't matter what the foundation is. You want to recommend a test unless the seller can produce a professional test within the past 2 years.
If, let's say, you wanna build a house on a lot of land, like a few acres in the county, and the house next door has super high radon levels,
Okay?
would you consider building a house next door? Does nearby houses foreshadow if you were to build a house, oh, my radon levels would probably be this high in the future?
Yeah, so the question is related to if the house next door has high radon and I'm thinking about building on the lot next door, is this an issue or concern for my consideration of building in this particular location? Well, the answer is that you don't know. But we see in the data that it does tend to be in certain areas. So it's uranium content in the soil. Back to our earlier commentary about that, it could be a concentration that was deposited generally by the glaciers when this stuff gets deposited. So it could have been deposited right under the house next door, but not where you're going to build your house. The problem is we really don't have an effective way to test that before construction occurs. But we do have techniques to build radon-resistant construction that will help a lot with your new home on that lot for many, many years, especially if you know there's a concern in the area. Then you can influence the construction for not a lot of money, but maybe upgrade the vapor barrier, do some other things underneath. You can have a passive system put in, which is just some piping in the center of the house. It can be hidden in a chase, and that will vent. If it's properly installed, will vent. It'll provide the gas somewhere to go and vent outside and go all the way through the roof. It has to vent outdoors. It can't vent inside the house or in the attic. But you can do things like that. I would never make a decision not to build because of that information, that knowledge going in. I just don't think it's not reliable, because you could build the whole house and test it, and it could be 1.0, or you just don't know. So, not to mention the systems are so effective at reducing and controlling the concentrations that to me, I'd rather have a system in this region, knowing what we know. I would rather have a system than not have a system. It's not really that the house is high, because the house could be low now and high next year. We have no idea how much uranium content is in that soil under the foundation, or where it is in the 1,000-year decay cycle. We have no idea. You're better off just test every 2 years. That's what they recommend. Test every 2 years. And as long as you feel comfortable with the result and the concentration level based on, you know, again, it's not a legal issue for you. So it's a personal health decision for the occupants, for you and your family, in the case of single family homes, whether or not you're comfortable with that concentration. So you test every 2 years. It's considered a long-term risk. So you don't have to be fixated on this. You know, some people, they're making these consumer radon monitors now. Has anybody seen those? It's a little electronic device that you can buy for as little as $100 and put it on the wall, and it'll give you a constant, you know, it'll give you a concentration. It'll give you, you know, what it's, the last reading that it took. It'll give you, say, over the last week what it's been. And people call in and they say, oh man, it's 4.2 this week. Last week it was 2.2. And they'll just become, I'll say fixated, but they'll become nervous. And so, you know, it's because it's a long-term risk. I personally don't recommend those products because I think that they alarm people in some cases. But if you have a system and you have one, and the system is working effectively, maybe it gives you the peace of mind that you need to feel comfortable in the home. So it's a personal decision, but you know, you can do this so many different ways. The best testing is long-term testing. It's a full year, and there's a certain type of device that we stock and we utilize some, but generally we just recommend them to people and sell them, and they're less than $100, including all the lab fees and everything. They're $75 or something, and it tells you where to put it. You know, you put it, say, in the basement, and you leave it there for a whole year, and you don't have to, you can open your windows, you just live how you live. That's another thing that changes the levels in a house. The way you live in the house, you might like to open your window every night, and when you leave in the, I know people who will have a window cracked in the wintertime. They just, for whatever reason, they like that fresh air. Well, the way you live in the house is different from someone else. You may not have 4 or 5 kids, you may not do 20 loads of laundry. So if you're not moving, if you're not in a real estate transaction, the best test and the one that's recommended by the authoritative people, you know, beyond ourselves, who, you know, people who wrote the standards and have done all this research, that's a full year. It's just a lot of people don't want to wait, and in real estate, you just don't have that kind of time. So they let us use sophisticated electronic devices. We're licensed, we have to follow certain procedures, we have to put certain notices on doors and thermostats, and it has to be, you know, 65 to 75 degrees in the house during the test. The windows have to stay closed, all these things. With a long-term test, you just live like you live, and it'll give you a true concentration of what your exposure risk is over time, the way you use the house. So that's interesting. Any other questions right now? Okay. So why is radon worth addressing? It's the #1 environmental cause of cancer mortality in the United States. So this would be things like we discussed briefly a minute ago, you know, pesticide use. There could be hormone use in animals, in food production. It could be just a whole plethora of environmental causes in that list. It is considered the #1 environmental cause. It is also considered to be a class 1 carcinogen, which is the highest level carcinogen or cancer-causing material, in a class with things like certain chemicals and other causes that have been linked to cancer. So it is considered a high-level cause. Of course, the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. You know, other reasons is worth addressing. So builds trust with buyers and clients. You know, you don't want to skirt an issue like radon, and then it comes back to bite you as an agent. I've had this happen, and it's, you know, people get very upset with the agent. The agent ends up frankly paying for a mitigation system to put in their house, or in this case, the brokerage paid for it. It wasn't the agent, but the brokerage. The broker said, you know what, we'll just pick it up.
Thanks, Ron.
And it wasn't, and I'll just say, I won't say who then, just because, but it wasn't Coldwell Banker Heritage, just for the record, but it was the right thing to do, so maybe, you know, if it would have been, then it was the right thing to do, but we've had that happen, and it's not fun because it's post-transaction, so it's 3 months later, they test, oh, well, you told us not to worry about it because it was a slab hum, a common, should have brought my list of common myths, but we'll go over. That's a common myth without getting off subject. All the foundation types experience high concentrations indoors. Don't even think about what kind of foundation the house has and think that matters. It doesn't. It doesn't matter if it's a slab, crawl space, multi-foundation, combination of the two, basement, crawl space, basement, it doesn't matter. Mobile homes. I mean, the mobile home, it doesn't matter really because but typically there's so much air circulating underneath. It's just not sealed up like a typical construction stick-built home. But you can't. You still want to test it because you don't know. I mean, it's more than likely those are probably going to be 9 out of 10 times going to be fine, just because of the way they're situated on a property, and then they might put some skirting under it or whatever they do. They're just not sealed up, and they're not insulated underneath typically like a normal home. A lot of times they'll have insulation under the floor, and then they'll just put some kind of vinyl or some kind of lattice or something around to keep animals and stuff out. So, you know, in those cases, it's typically less of an issue. But I couldn't say we've known, there's no training or no information that I've ever seen or data that says, don't worry about that home type. It's technically not a foundation type, I guess. It'd be a home type or construction type. But anyway, so builds trust, protects long-term health of homeowners, pretty obvious, I guess, but that is the point of this work, is to protect occupants indoors from a known environmental risk. And it's easy to test. I mean, relatively speaking, it's super easy. You can do it yourself. It's just not approved for real estate when you do it yourself. You can certainly do it yourself for information, though, and those tests, generally speaking, are pretty accurate, at least as a screening tool. You can get them at Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Lowe's, order them online. Not hard to get a radon test for, you know, probably $30 to $60, depending on the type or whatever. We stock a couple different types at the office that we sell if people want to buy one and do it themselves. So can normally be reduced by qualified, experienced radon professionals when elevated. I would say almost 100% of the time. I mean, 100% of the time, the reduction is probably at least 50% with a well-designed and engineered and installed system in a home. I would say the least reduction is typically 50% from whatever the test was before it was installed. There's seasonality and stuff to it, but as long as that time period is relatively similar in weather and so forth. But systems generally are going to overcome weather variations, seasonality to a large extent. You'll still have, instead of it going, you know, we'll see a test. If you've ever seen one of our reports, it'll give you hourly readings. So it'll have, you know, 50 plus readings that electronic monitor that we use is continuously taking reading. Well, it'll give you, so you get the report in the last page behind the first couple pages of information on the property and the result, the average. The last page will be every single reading that it took. Well, you'll see with no system in place, you might see ones and you might see 20s in the same test. So it'll go like this. and that's just a 2 or 3 day test. With a system, that'll be like this. it'll be, you know, along the average might be 1 or 2, and then you'll see 1s, 0.5s, you'll see a 3, you might see maybe a storm came through. It was 5 or 6 for a few hours, and then it comes back down. But that system it'll control those levels. That's what mitigation means, to control. Doesn't mean to eliminate. Sort of like mold. You can have mold that's visible and contaminated materials removed, but you won't eliminate all mold spores from an indoor environment because it exists outside. Every time you open the door, it flies in, and you walk in and it comes with you. It just won't be an abnormal. It won't be an abnormal ecology. So in the case of radon, it'll control it to a safe, what there's no known safe level, but to a safer or more highly recognized as safer concentration below the 4.0 level.
Let's say like a really big apartment building that's 40 stories high, would it be a different level of calculated law for?
Yes, typically, now, multifamily and high-rise buildings are a different animal. We deal with them routinely. But they, generally speaking, radon, it goes down about 50% for each level that you go up. Now, in those environments, it's different because of the common stairwells that it'll travel through the stairwell that you use to, if you, in an emergency, you know, you're 20 stories up, you use the stairwell, well, that it'll travel, so we test those. We'll test those stairwells. And then what we also have to do is we'll test on a staggered basis, we'll test 10% of all the upper floors of that building. I've not seen it a lot, but I did see one. It was one of the loft properties by Fifth Third Field in Dayton. And it was way up in the building. I bet it was, 5 stories, 6 stories up, one unit, it was high. And you know what's very interesting? We figured out there was a chase that went all the way up, and we found it was in this real remote area of the cellar of this building. And it was not a finished basement, it was more like it was an old building, they had redone it. I feel like it, had been used for whatever industrial purposes back in the day. But this chase was probably 3 feet by 3 feet, and it was brick. And it went all the way up. And we were able to seal that from the bottom because it wasn't in use. We sealed it down at the bottom to prevent the air from underneath from going up, and it solved the problem. But that chase communicated with that unit, and that's where it was coming from. So you've got, in those cases, you have to find it, and it's, again, not reliable. The 50% rule is really for residential structures. Yes, it generally is going to be quite a bit lower at the top.
It doesn't really matter because if the first floor is at the top, you still have.
Well, it's still recommended for sure. It's it does come down to the comfort level of the owner or the occupants, but yes, generally speaking. Okay, we talked maybe just briefly, or maybe we touched, but how does radon get into a home? Well, it gets in through basically construction voids, cracks, gaps, and seals that they're not sealed in typical construction to this day. It's probably a little better now, but the tightness of the homes makes them naturally ventilate less now, so that with the insulation values, the walls and ceilings and so forth, it's hard for makeup air, which a home needs to breathe, when the mechanical systems are running and so forth, when you're heating, creates a stack effect. It's easier for the house to pull makeup air from underneath itself because of the way the builders build them, and they don't seal, typically don't seal between the floor and the wall. They leave that contraction joint between the slab and the foundation wall, they leave that there so that once you finish it, if you get a leak, you get a crack in the foundation, 5 years down the road, finished basement, it'll actually just kind of seep down that wall and go underneath and just drain under there, and you never even know. It's a natural way to let it. So they don't seal that usually. It's just one example. I've seen them sealed, but they don't typically. Anything that's coming through as a penetration, obviously sump pits, huge entry point, because they don't seal those. They might put a pump in it and discharge, but generally speaking, the water level is kept below the perforated tile that comes into the pit from the perimeter, which is bringing water to the pit to pump out. This slide, just have a pointer, but you get your floor cracked. This number one, once you put your flooring down, so this carpet square, these floors crack all the time, especially at contraction. They make joints in the concrete so they crack, so they won't have unsightly and they look bad. They put those joints there to let them crack, to make them crack there instead of cracking through the center of the floor where people complain and it look unsightly. That's why they do that. So things like these floor cracks, they develop over time from freeze-thaw cycles. You can't prevent it, and you don't even know where they are. And we find in slabs it's much more impactful to the radon levels, much more difficult to mitigate when you have a lot of floor cracks under. We had one in Centerville one time. I'll never forget it because we guarantee our results. Generally speaking, we're going to guarantee you on the front end for a contract price, we're going to get this under 4 for you, or else we're going to do what we need to do to get it under 4, unless there's some known defect, and we define those in the contract. We say, listen, unless we core a hole and there's water, it's like a hot, water pouring out. We can't pull air through water. If you have a lake under your slab, that's not really something we can control. So I'm just giving an example of, there are very few situations where we don't guarantee our results. So this one, we were fighting it, testing it, doing stuff, trying to seal more stuff, find different things. It was probably a couple months. We had to have lost, tons of money on this job. And lo and behold, the new owner came in, and of course they were upset, not necessarily with us. We were trying, we were communicating. And they were upset that we weren't able to get it lower in their house. And they called us one day. They were having the carpet replaced in the house. They said, you're not going to believe, because we told them, we said, there's got to be something under here we can't see, that something's happened letting it in. And so you have to find the radon to mitigate when you're having trouble. And you have to find where it's coming in and address it. And so, anyway, they took the carpet up, and this floor was just cracked, huge cracks in the floor everywhere. We said, all right, don't do anything. We went over there that day. I swear, I think it was the same day afternoon. We went over there. We used 5 or 10 tubes of caulk, sealed all those cracks for them. And I don't think we charged them even for that. Honestly, could have justified charging for that, but we didn't, I don't think. And we tested that thing, and it came down to nothing. Within a day, it was, 1 or something. I don't remember, but it was low. Not even close to 4. And we couldn't get it under 4, but it was, say it was 10, and I think it was 5, or something. So it'll come down 50%. Sometimes on the problem ones, it'll come down about half. And then it'll be something we can't see. It'll be a footing underneath. We don't have drawings. It'll be, whatever. It'll be some, a lot of times 50%. There'll be a footing down the center of the basement, but they'll have a beam overhead. They won't have, it won't be obvious. They won't have a load-bearing wall that goes the whole length. Usually they'll have posts. If you have posts, that's a 2x2 footing down the center. That's to keep the house from cracking. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff. So what else? You have mechanical penetration number 7. Is basically, it's supposed to be a water heater, a flue, and some of these different penetrations they make in construction. Obviously, your drains, number 5. They don't really seal those flanges, not to the point. And over time, stuff moves around and opens opens up. And so, you know, just, it's impossible to seal it out. You have to put systems in from all the data and all the, you know, really probably millions of systems that have been installed throughout the world, but thousands and thousands per year. You have to have a mechanical means of depressurizing or collecting the gas and keeping it from coming into the house. So what we do is we make the pressure under the house lower than in the house. And by doing that, we control the migration of air. So we stop it from coming underneath, at least to a large extent. By pulling air from underneath, it's having to make that up elsewhere through walls and so forth. And it's as long as you don't put a fan on that's ridiculously, you know, these fans aren't powerful, they aren't pulling a lot of air, you're not negatively impacting the energy any more than you have to, because in theory, if you reverse it, you know, you are pulling conditioned air out of the house, in theory. But what we do is we just try to use the least airflow, or the, not weakest, but the lightest fan we can, if you will. And that's how it's done. So the factors that affect the levels indoors is, again, location of construction based on what's underneath, uranium content in the soil, pressures inside and outside the home. That would be, you know, wind would put pressure on a home. Outside, pressures inside are created by mechanical systems like heating systems, ventilation systems, range hoods that, you know, above your cooking surface that shoot air out while you're cooking. You have bath fans, if properly vented outside. Those create negative pressure and force the house to make that up. Clothes dryers, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, again, weather. So weather's probably the biggest one, and then heating, and then of course, doing laundry. So those all affect it dramatically, especially if you don't have a system. A system will, again, keep it controlled much better than if you don't have one. This is just the Ohio part of the EPA's radon map. If you see, level 1 is red. This would be the highest concentrations found in the country. I probably should add the U.S. map. They were talking about updating it. They've done some things, but they haven't re-released the official map. This red zone goes all the way up to Minnesota. It goes around below the Great Lakes and all the way to Minnesota. And then from us, I mean, you're basically Chicago coming down around the Great Lakes through Ohio and continuing all the way into New England, to the New England states, to the northeast. And so every county in Ohio has documented elevated radon concentrations indoors, all 88 counties. And really, level 2 is the second level. You know, all of Ohio is in a level that is of concern, so testing is recommended in virtually every building in Ohio, no matter what type of building it is or where it's located, which county it's in, etc. Oh my gosh, we're flying. Time's flying. How to address. We're getting through this part of the presentation. How to address. So suggest a test if it's been more than 2 years. Be proactive about it during real estate transactions. Don't try to sweep it under the rug. Terrible idea. I mean, testing, and we don't even do 99% of the tests during real estate. The home inspectors do it. And we've intentionally just stepped aside and we don't mark. Obviously, we're qualified to test. As a specialist, we can do anything related to the trade. We have 10 of them on our full-time staff, 10 specialists. Most companies will have 1, maybe 2, and then it'll be the owner will be the same one doing the estimate and answering doing everything. A lot of trades people are, individual people. They might have a son helping or a helper, or maybe they'll have somebody helping in the office, a partner, or a spouse, or so forth. You know, but basically, you know, for us, what we've done is just tried to work within the industry. We want as many tests conducted as possible, and it's better for the home inspector to probably do it because they're already there, and they do it as an add-on. I don't know if it saves people, might save people a little bit of money, and then what we try to do is just work with people on designing the systems and installing them residentially. We are happy to do a test. If you guys, you know, want something tested, you're more than welcome. Please call us, and we'll be happy to send a licensed person out from our staff to test it for you. Not a problem. It's a standalone service, just like anything else. So you can just call or email or text or whatever. Let me know, and we'll take care of it. So present addressing Radon as a positive toward completing the sale. You know, again, in this area, almost no matter what it tests, it's a concern. We know it's a known risk to people's health. We know it causes lung cancer. We know that it kills people in some cases over time. So it's a positive to test and just address it. If it's low, it's great. If it's elevated, and you're armed with the information to, negotiate through the transaction, and at least the buyer has the information, even if the seller is not, amicable to this concept of paying for this for these people. That's beside the point, honestly, from the standpoint of protecting people in the home.
Yeah, I've got a question. It's, so let's say you're walking a property, 15, 20 minutes. What things did you look for in signs that just walking through, going in the cross space and like, okay, this probably could potentially have higher
Oh.
no big
That's a really difficult question. Again, the recommendation is to test, because that is dangerous for me. To be honest, I'm not comfortable answering that specifically and saying, hey, I guess just to answer you in a way that it gives you something. It would, generally speaking, it's hard. That is really tough, because generally speaking, an older home that's not as tight is going to test lower because it has so much natural ventilation. It's not insulated well. It's got all these issues. It's so drafty that, believe it or not, the air exchange is so good that it's probably going to not be elevated, but it's just not reliable, because underneath you could have a huge concentration of uranium that's at the end of its decay cycle, and it's just emitting an excessive amount of gas. So it's just really not a good idea for me to try to, even things like, no vapor barrier in the crawl space. I could give you a few little tidbits, but if the crawl space looks like it needs to be cleaned and addressed anyway, then it's probably going to help improve some of the entry of the gas if that's addressed. But you have to test inside the space and the finished space. So it's really kind of hard to look outside the space or just kind of stand there and say, well, it seems like this would be a good one to test. If it hasn't been tested in 2 years professionally and you're doing a real estate deal, the only proper recommendation by the rules is to recommend a test during the inspection period. And then if they don't want to pay for it, that's up to the buyer. Because the buyer pays for the test, and then, of course, they generally will ask the seller to help or even pay for the system to be installed at the time. Okay, so always test to determine whether or not mitigation is needed. We've discussed the action level. EPA is 4.0. That's what we use. We don't talk about World Health Organization a lot during transactions unless some buyer or somebody has seen that data or wants to discuss in more detail. Theirs is 2.7. So that is where we're seeing, and even from the James Cancer Research Center in Columbus, in the last year or two, we've had some presentations And I'm moderating a conference today for the Ohio Association of Radon Professionals, and I'm going to get back to that when we're finished here. But we have their oncologists doing presentations during those conferences almost every year, and they're talking about the 2.7 level, and they're seeing that in their latest research at the James. So very interesting. And we have, of course, right here in Columbus, the James Cancer Research Center is one of the foremost cancer research institutions in the world, not just the country. So anyway, it's not a good reason to lose a sale. And so, you know, I know I've probably beaten that up pretty good, but you know, that's our message to you is, you know, we're here to support you, and so are the other licensed people in the industry. So, you know, you make your recommendation and you just, you know, let your client make their final decision for their personal decision. Successful mitigation tips. Use a contractor licensed by the Ohio Department of Health. This is Ohio law. This is in the Ohio Administrative Code. So in Ohio, it must be a licensed person or company. And as a company to install systems, you have to have a second license, which is a contractor's license. And also keep in mind a contractor must provide a written proposal or contract and a drawing depicting the proposed system location with details of the components of the system, where they will be located, and that should be approved, or must be approved, if you're smart, must be approved by the owner prior to installation. Be wary of those who not do this in advance. There are some people who try to, because they're spread so thin, you know, you call us, we send somebody out to look at it. And even sometimes, you know, Arthur and I have had a couple where you got, you know, we're trying to get something done quick. We generally are going to drop whatever, do whatever we have to do to go look at that. Because if we don't, then we still have to, and we still have to give you an understanding and a drawing and so forth that depicts where this is going to be, because otherwise you cause problems with people. But generally speaking, people try to get away without doing that because they're spread thin on time, or, you know, don't have many people, and so they'll try to email you something, they'll try to look at something on a website. And we do have some good information with Google Earth and some of the auditors pages and stuff now, but that does not meet the letter of the law prior to installation. So just be careful if somebody's trying to say, oh yeah, I'll do it for $1,200. They don't give you a written proposal, don't give you a drawing. These are red flags, generally speaking. Depressurization versus pressurization, other system types. We talked about this a little bit. The depressurization is what we typically do when you guys get, you know, the piping and you see the fan, and you guys probably have all seen radon systems, I hope. But, I don't know if I have pictures in this particular, but we have them on the website and so forth. The traditional systems they're PVC piping with centrifugal fans. Those must be powered, and then they vent above the roof line. They can either be interior through a garage and put in an attic, or whatever way, up through a chase and in an attic, or they can go outside and be on an outside wall, but they have to vent above the roof line, generally speaking, for residential. And then pressurization, other techniques. I mean, if you can pressurize the space inside enough, you can make the pressure higher here than underneath. And this involves bringing more air in to the building from outside and not exhausting as much as you're bringing in. So you're pressurizing, and you're also bringing in low concentration air from outside. We also do exchange, where we're pulling air from inside that's higher radon level air inside the house, and we're bringing in fresh air and replacing that stale, high radon laden air with the fresh air, which outside is typically 0.4 picocuries is the concentration, average concentration outdoors, 0.4, so 10% of the action level, and we can exchange it as long as it's not over about 12 picocuries indoors. We can generally get it under 4.0, but we really can't guarantee those. As far as, you know, they work, but they're also filtering air and doing other things for air quality. So we probably only install, 10 of them a year out of 1,000 systems a year. But it's gonna help. I mean, it'll bring it down 75%. We just can't guarantee it'll be under 4 anytime we test for the next 30 years. It's just not, it's not as reliable. It's not the same type of a system, but it is an alternative to the traditional systems in certain situations with lots of foundations and additions and stuff. Range of investment levels and installation times. Generally speaking, most of our systems go in one day. We just change the staffing levels. Sometimes we'll be there on a couple different days to get multiple crawl spaces done. We'll send in different crews. We'll send people in to go line the crawl spaces, then send a specialist in to do the piping and install the system, do the electric on a separate day. We've kind of come up with ways to get stuff done faster by doing some of that. But generally speaking, though, I'm sorry, I went to the next slide, but generally speaking, these systems run anywhere from about, I'm gonna say $1,300 up to, $3,500, but that's where you have multiple crawl spaces, a lot going on, complex systems. Those are a little more rare. I would say the average system is under 2,000 installed, and that includes testing again, which, generally $175 or something. That includes that, everything. So they're really, from an affordability standpoint, when you look at this versus say, heating and air conditioning and some of these other mechanical type systems, which is what they are, relatively affordable compared to say replacing a furnace and, air conditioning systems. Those guys are getting up to $15,000-$20,000 on those these days. So we used to do a lot of that work. We were a carrier dealer for years, 20 years. Sold that in 2018, and all we do now is air quality. If it doesn't have something to do with indoor air quality, we don't do it. We do stuff that prevents it, which we'll get into soon. But let's get through this. I think we've covered all that stuff. Obviously, getting written reports from it. Any questions? And then what we'll do is we grab something to eat, and then and we'll just kind of roll. I don't want to hold you up past your time. I know you guys are all busy and want to make sure we end on time. So
Yeah,
that's that for radon. Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys covered it, but beyond cancer, are there any like telltale signs of radon in the house? It has no scent, right?
No, there
Yeah.
really aren't.
Like, would you feel anything like
No.
like common allergies?
No, it would only be if, honestly, it's only would be lung issues, breathing issues, but
Right.
it's not from today's, I'm breathing this in right
But on
now.
here-
It's more of what your body's developing as a disease.
On here you have, if it's 8, that's 16 cigarettes a day.
It's really ODH that drove that
Gotcha.
data more than ARP, but they're on there. But it's supposed to be public service, just to give people an idea. And I think part of the origin of that too is studying, okay, the smoking habits of smokers who develop lung cancer and the concentrations that people were exposed to who developed lung cancer. And then they correlate that data,
Right.
and it's, like
It's just
I said,
a different
lots
path to
of-
the same outcome.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
It's interesting.
Yeah.